The warning arrives quietly, which makes it louder. Backstage at a televised awards rehearsal in the early 2000s, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, Beyoncé stands near a mirror adjusting an in-ear monitor. Destiny's Child has just finished a run-through. A veteran industry figure, someone who has survived decades of pop cycles, leans in and lowers their voice. The anchor detail is the sentence itself. Be careful with Michael. Not angry, not dramatic, just precise. Beyoncé nods, polite, unreadable. Across the room, a stagehand cues lights for another act, and Michael Jackson's name hangs in the air longer than the warning itself. This is the instant frozen in retrospect, the first time Beyoncé is told that proximity to Michael Jackson comes with a cost she can't yet see. Weeks earlier, the rules of Beyoncé's world had been accelerating fast. Destiny's Child was no longer a promising group, it was a machine. Schedules were ruthless, image was negotiated down to the frame. Every performance was a test of control. Beyoncé was learning how power worked in pop, not just vocal power, but structural power. Michael Jackson loomed over all of it, a living benchmark. His shadow defined ambition and fear in equal measure. To be compared to him was a compliment. To be too close to him was, according to some, dangerous. The turning point object in that warning wasn't a contract or a microphone, it was proximity. According to accounts from people around Beyoncé at the time, Michael's name carried a double meaning in industry rooms. On one hand, he was the blueprint, excellence, discipline, innovation. On the other, he was the cautionary tale, isolation, scrutiny, the price of being untouchable. The stakes embedded in that quiet warning were clear. Get too close, and you might inherit not just the influence, but the consequences. Days earlier, Beyoncé had watched Michael from a distance at another event. Same era, same kind of room. He entered late, as he often did. Conversations softened, movement slowed. Beyoncé noticed the choreography of attention before anyone explained it to her. She clocked the way security shifted, the way executives straightened, the way cameras found him without being pointed. This wasn't fandom, it was gravity. The warning she'd receive later would attach itself to this image, giving it weight. The industry context mattered. Black excellence at that scale was celebrated publicly and punished privately. Beyoncé was being positioned as safe, controlled, marketable across demographics. Michael Jackson had once been that too, until he became something bigger, something harder to contain. The warning wasn't about talent, it was about trajectory. According to insiders, the subtext was always the same. Don't let the system decide you're uncontrollable. That night at rehearsal, Beyoncé didn't ask follow-up questions. She adjusted her in-ear, stepped back onto the stage, and hit her marks. But the anchor detail, the phrase, "be careful with Michael," stuck. It followed her into later conversations, later rooms. When Michael's name came up in interviews, in tribute segments, in whispered comparisons, Beyoncé's responses were respectful but measured. Admiration without overreach, distance with intention. The stakes sharpened because opportunities kept aligning them. Award shows, tribute planning committees, charity events. According to people involved, Beyoncé was floated as a potential collaborator more than once. Each time, the same quiet hesitations surfaced behind the scenes. Would the association help or complicate her rise? Would it invite comparison too early? Would it pull her into Michael's orbit before she'd fully built her own center? The warning gained texture as stories circulated, not accusations, stories. About how Michael rehearsed until dawn, about how he controlled every camera angle, about how he demanded perfection and paid for it with isolation. Beyoncé listened, she learned. The anchor detail remained the same, Michael Jackson as both North Star and caution sign. By the time Beyoncé launched her solo trajectory, the warning had become part of her internal map. She studied Michael's performances obsessively, but rarely spoke of him unprompted. When she did, she framed him as influence, not destination. According to accounts, she once told a collaborator that Michael showed you how far it can go. She didn't add whether that distance was safe. The cliff edge arrived when the industry began openly naming her as the heir. Headlines whispered it, fans shouted it. Beyoncé felt the comparison tighten. Michael Jackson wasn't just an influence anymore. He was a mirror the world was holding up to her face. And soon, through a moment she couldn't rehearse for, Beyoncé would finally understand exactly why that warning had been delivered so softly, and why it had never really been optional.
The next night, the warning resurfaced in a different form. Beyoncé sat in a production meeting for a televised tribute segment, the table crowded with binders and cue sheets. Michael Jackson's name was printed in bold at the top of the rundown. A director tapped the page with a pen and said, "We need someone who can carry this." Eyes drifted toward Beyoncé. The anchor detail was the cue sheet itself, proof that admiration had turned into assignment. Beyoncé listened, asked about lighting and tempo, and said nothing about the weight of the name hovering inches from her hands. At rehearsal, the escalation came step by step. First, the choreography notes, then the wardrobe discussion. Someone suggested a glove reference and was quietly overruled. Another proposed a medley. Beyoncé asked which song and how long the camera would stay wide. Michael Jackson's performances were being dissected not as inspiration but as engineering problems. Beyoncé noticed the shift. When a legacy becomes technical, it's because people are afraid of it. That morning, a mentor called. According to accounts, the advice was careful and coded. "Honor him," the voice said, "but don't let them dress you in his shadow." The anchor detail was the phone itself, an object carrying the same warning she'd heard before, now sharpened by stakes. Beyoncé took notes, literal notes, about framing and intention. She was learning how to navigate homage without surrender. The pressure intensified as media chatter grew louder. Headlines floated comparisons. Pundits debated succession. Beyoncé's team tracked language closely, circling phrases that implied inheritance rather than influence. Michael Jackson's name appeared beside hers more frequently, like a drumbeat. The warning echoed again: proximity has consequences. At another rehearsal, the escalation turned physical. A camera operator asked Beyoncé to hit a mark farther downstage for the Michael shot. She paused, glanced at the tape on the floor, and asked why that angle mattered. The operator explained that Michael used it to command the frame. Beyoncé nodded and chose a different mark. The anchor detail was the camera cue, small, decisive, a refusal to borrow power that wasn't hers. Behind closed doors, conversations grew more candid. A producer reportedly said, "They'll crown you faster if you lean into it." Beyoncé replied with a question about sound mix and ended the discussion. The thesis was forming in motion. The system rewards replication until it punishes originality. Michael Jackson had learned that lesson the hardest way. Beyoncé was trying to learn it without paying the same price. Then came the call everyone remembers. Not a collaboration pitch, not a meeting request, just a message passed along that Michael had noticed her work and approved. According to people close to Beyoncé, the reaction wasn't celebration, it was silence. The anchor detail was the message itself, a validation that carried gravity. To be seen by Michael was an honor. To be claimed by the comparison was risk. The next escalation arrived at an awards show, the kind where legends are invoked even when they aren't present. Michael Jackson's name was spoken from the stage. The camera cut to Beyoncé as it always did. She smiled, applauded, kept her posture neutral. Later, backstage, a journalist asked if she felt like the next Michael. Beyoncé answered with respect and redirection, praising his uniqueness. The anchor detail was the question, proof the warning had become public property. At rehearsal the following week, Beyoncé insisted on live vocals where others suggested safety. According to insiders, she cited Michael's discipline without naming him. "If you're going to do it all the way." The anchor detail was the microphone, held steady, unadorned. She wasn't avoiding Michael's standards, she was adopting his work ethic without his mythology. The escalation peaked when plans surfaced for a major tribute performance that would place Beyoncé center stage with archival footage of Michael behind her. The proposal crossed her desk late one evening. The anchor detail was the screen, Michael's image towering, eternal. Beyoncé studied it and asked for changes, less footage, more band, more present tense. The request was granted, but the message was clear. The industry wanted lineage. On the eve of the performance, Beyoncé stood alone on stage during a lighting check, the empty arena humming. Michael Jackson's name was stitched into the moment, whether she invited it or not. The warning she'd received years earlier had narrowed into a single truth. Admiration could open doors, but comparison could lock them behind you. What would happen next, what she would witness, and what it would cost, was about to make that truth unavoidable.
The detonation arrived not as confrontation, but as consequence. The anchor detail circled back one last time to that untouched contract on the table, now days old, already irrelevant. Prince's refusal didn't echo through press releases or diss tracks, it echoed through behavior. The system adjusted because it had to. Within a week, Prince released music on his own terms again. The anchor detail was the method, direct-to-fan channels, limited windows, no intermediaries holding leverage, no apology, no explanation. The refusal had become policy. For anyone paying attention, the message was unmistakable. Prince wasn't rejecting Jay-Z, he was rejecting the assumption that power must be delegated to be multiplied. Jay-Z responded the only way someone at his level could, structurally. The anchor detail was Roc Nation's public positioning in the months that followed. Less talk about owning catalogs outright, more emphasis on management, touring, and partnerships where artists retained masters. The industry didn't frame this as a reaction, but insiders understood the timeline. Prince's no had clarified the future terrain. The immediate aftermath inside executive circles was quiet recalibration. The anchor detail was language. Deals were no longer pitched as ownership plus freedom. They were pitched as services. Words changed because words signal intent. Prince had exposed how often flexibility was used to disguise control. For younger artists watching, the refusal landed like a warning flare. The anchor detail was comparison. If Prince, global icon, catalog monster, proven revenue, could still see danger in a deal from Jay-Z, then no contract was inherently safe. The question shifted from, "Is this a good deal?" to, "Why is there a deal at all?" Prince never publicly detailed the meeting. That omission mattered. The anchor detail was restraint. By not narrating the encounter, he prevented it from becoming a morality play about personalities. Instead, it remained about principle. The industry couldn't dismiss it as ego or rivalry. There was nothing to quote, nothing to debate, only outcomes to observe. Years later, Jay-Z would speak openly about artists needing to own their work from day one. The anchor detail was emphasis. He framed ownership as non-negotiable, not aspirational. That alignment didn't erase the difference between them, but it showed the impact. Prince's refusal had reinforced a truth even moguls had to respect. The broader cultural meaning hardened with time. In Black music history, ownership has always been the unfinished fight. The anchor detail here was continuity. Prince's stand against Warner Brothers, his public battles, his independent experiments, all of it culminated in that quiet moment with Jay-Z. The deal he turned down was the proof that the struggle hadn't ended just because the faces in charge had changed. What Prince made clear was brutal in its simplicity. Power isn't proven by who offers you a deal, it's proven by whether you need one. Turning down Jay-Z wasn't a flex, it was a measurement. Prince measured his freedom against the contract and found the contract lacking. The final consequence was permanence. No one seriously attempted to sign Prince again after that. The anchor detail was absence. The offers stopped because the answer was known in advance. That certainty is rare in an industry built on persuasion. Prince achieved it through consistency, not confrontation. The last line of meaning settles there. Prince didn't just reject a record deal, he rejected the final illusion that independence needs validation from power to be real. By leaving that contract untouched, he made his point clearer than any speech ever could.